The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Clarence's house as Queen Camilla sat in her private study, nervously turning a small silver locket between her fingers. The weight of her secret had grown heavier with each passing day, and she knew that keeping it hidden much longer would be impossible. The locket contained a photograph that could change everything about how the world saw her, and more importantly, how her husband, King Charles, would react when he discovered the truth. For months, Camilla had been receiving mysterious letters delivered through unofficial channels. Each envelope bore no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably familiar. The sender knew about her past in ways that even Charles did not, threatening to expose details that could shake the very foundation of the monarchy. The letters spoke of relationships, decisions, and moments from decades ago that she had carefully buried and hoped would never surface. The queen consort had always been aware that her journey to the throne was controversial. The public had slowly warmed to her over the years, but this revelation could undo all the progress she had made in winning their acceptance. She thought about her children, her grandchildren, and the impact this could have on their lives. The royal family had weathered many storms, but this felt different, more personal, more devastating. As she heard footsteps approaching her study, Camilla quickly tucked the locket into a hidden compartment of her antique writing desk. King Charles entered with his usual warm smile, carrying the morning papers and a cup of tea for her. He noticed the tension in her shoulders immediately, his years of marriage having taught him to read her moods with remarkable accuracy. When he asked if everything was all right, she forced a smile and nodded. But the lie felt bitter on her tongue. That afternoon, while Charles attended a meeting with government officials, Camilla made a decision that would set everything in motion. She called her most trusted lady-in-waiting, Lady Margaret Whitfield, a woman who had served the royal family for over 30 years and whose discretion was absolute. When Margaret arrived, she found the queen consort pacing the length of her sitting room, clearly agitated and unable to find peace. Camilla revealed that she had been keeping something from Charles, something that could potentially harm not just their marriage, but the reputation of the crown itself. She explained about the letters, the threats, and the evidence that someone possessed regarding her past. Lady Margaret listened with growing concern, understanding immediately that this was not a matter they could handle quietly or alone. The situation required immediate action, but it also demanded the utmost care to prevent it from becoming a public scandal. The two women spent hours discussing possible approaches, weighing the risks of each option. They could try to handle the blackmailer privately, but that might only delay the inevitable. They could bring in security services, but that would create an official record and potentially more exposure. Or Camilla could tell Charles herself, confessing everything and hoping that their love and his understanding would be enough to weather whatever storm was coming. As evening approached and Charles prepared to return home, Camilla made her choice. She would tell her husband everything that very night, regardless of the consequences. The weight of deception had become unbearable, and she knew that their marriage could only survive if it was built on complete honesty. She sent Lady Margaret away and began preparing for what might be the most difficult conversation of her life. When Charles arrived home, he immediately sensed that something significant was about to happen. Camilla's demeanor was different, more serious than he had seen in years. She asked him to join her in their private sitting room, away from staff and any possible interruptions. As they settled into their favorite chairs by the fireplace, she took a deep breath and began to speak, knowing that the words she was about to say would change everything between them forever. Charles set down his brandy glass with trembling hands as Camilla's words echoed in the silence between them. The fire crackled in the hearth, but the warmth seemed to drain from the room as she revealed the contents of the mysterious letters. She spoke of a relationship from her youth, long before she had ever met Charles, that had resulted in consequences she had never shared with anyone. The silver locket contained a photograph of a child, a daughter she had given up for adoption when she was barely 20 years old. The king's face showed a mixture of shock, hurt, and confusion as he processed this revelation. For nearly 2 decades of marriage, he had believed he knew everything about the woman he loved. They had weathered public criticism, family disapproval, and media scrutiny together, but this secret had remained buried in silence. Charles stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkened gardens as he tried to understand why Camilla had never trusted him with this truth. Camilla continued her confession, explaining how the adoption had been arranged privately through a family friend when she was young and unmarried. The father had been a fellow from her social circle who had disappeared when he learned of the pregnancy, leaving her to face the situation alone. Her parents had insisted on secrecy, concerned about the scandal it could cause for their family's reputation. She had agreed to the adoption believing it was best for the child, but had never stopped wondering about the daughter she had given away. The blackmailer, according to the letters, was someone who had discovered this secret through old records and was now threatening to expose it unless certain demands were met. They wanted money, but more than that, they wanted to destroy Camilla's reputation and position within the royal family. The person behind the threat seemed to have intimate knowledge of the adoption process and had somehow obtained the photograph that Camilla had kept as her only connection to her lost child. Charles finally turned from the window, his face etched with pain but also understanding. He approached his wife and took her hands in his, asking why she had carried this burden alone for so many years. Camilla broke down completely, admitting that she had been terrified of losing him, of disappointing him, and of bringing shame to the crown. She had convinced herself that the past was best left buried, but the blackmailer's threats had made silence impossible. The king's response surprised her with its gentleness. Rather than anger or condemnation, he expressed sadness that she had felt unable to share such an important part of her life with him. He reminded her of their wedding vows and assured her that nothing in her past could change his love for her. However, he also made it clear that they would need to handle this situation with extreme care to protect both their family and the monarchy itself. That night, Charles barely slept as he considered the implications of Camilla's revelation. By morning, he had made several decisions that would reshape how they approached the crisis. He contacted his most trusted advisor, Sir Michael Thornton, and arranged for an emergency meeting at Buckingham Palace. He also reached out to the head of royal security, knowing that they would need to investigate the source of the blackmail while maintaining absolute discretion. The next few days passed in a blur of secret meetings and careful planning. Charles insisted that Camilla should not blame herself for decisions made decades ago under difficult circumstances. Instead, he focused their energy on determining who was behind the threats and how to stop them from causing further harm. The king's protective instincts had been fully awakened, and he was determined to shield his wife from any additional pain while ensuring that the monarchy's reputation remained intact. As they worked together to address the crisis, Charles and Camilla found their relationship strengthening rather than weakening under the pressure. The honesty had created a new level of intimacy between them, and Charles's unwavering support gave Camilla hope that they could overcome this challenge together. However, both of them knew that the real test would come when they discovered the identity of their tormentor and the full extent of what they were facing. Sir Michael Thornton arrived at Buckingham Palace before dawn, his usually composed demeanor showing signs of strain as he carried a leather briefcase containing the results of their investigation. The past week had been spent quietly gathering information about the blackmailer's identity, using resources available only to the highest levels of government. What they had discovered was far more complex and dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Investigation had revealed that the person behind the threatening letters was not a random opportunist seeking money, but someone with direct connections to Camilla's past. Through careful analysis of the handwriting and cross-referencing with adoption records from the 1970s, they had identified the blackmailer as Sarah Henderson, a woman who worked for the private adoption agency that had handled Camilla's case decades earlier. Henderson had recently been dismissed from her position after being caught stealing confidential files, and her actions appeared to be motivated by both financial desperation and personal revenge. Charles listened grimly as Sir Michael explained that Henderson had not only accessed Camilla's file but had also made contact with the adopted daughter, now a successful businesswoman named Emma Clark living in Australia. The most disturbing revelation was that Henderson had told Emma about her royal connection without any preparation or support, causing tremendous emotional upheaval in the young woman's life. Emma had reportedly been devastated to learn about her origins in such a cruel and calculated manner. The briefing continued with details about Henderson's demands, which went far beyond simple financial blackmail. She wanted Camilla to publicly acknowledge her daughter and face the scandal that would inevitably follow. Henderson seemed to believe that exposing this secret would be enough to force Camilla's resignation from her royal duties, potentially destabilizing the monarchy during an already challenging period in British history. Sir Michael presented Charles with several options for dealing with the situation, each carrying significant risks. They could pursue legal action against Henderson for extortion and theft of confidential documents, but this would likely result in public exposure of the very secret they were trying to protect. Alternatively, they could attempt to negotiate with Henderson privately, though this might only embolden her to make further demands in the future. The king surprised his advisor by rejecting both conventional approaches. Instead, Charles announced his intention to take direct action that would address not only the blackmail threat, but also the deeper issue of Camilla's relationship with her daughter. He explained that after extensive conversations with Camilla, they had decided that the right course of action was to reach out to Emma Clark directly, offering support and the possibility of a relationship if she was interested. This decision shocked Sir Michael, who immediately began outlining the potential consequences for the royal family's reputation. Charles listened patiently but remained firm in his resolve, explaining that they had spent too many years allowing fear of public opinion to dictate their personal lives. He felt that honesty and courage were more important than maintaining a perfect public image, especially when it came to family relationships. Camilla joined the meeting at this point, having spent the morning in prayer and reflection at the palace chapel. She supported Charles's decision completely, explaining that she had lived with regret about her daughter for too long and could not continue to let fear prevent her from doing what was right. She was prepared to face whatever consequences came from acknowledging Emma publicly, if that was what Emma wanted. The royal couple's united front impressed Sir Michael, though he continued to express concerns about the timing and potential impact on the monarchy's stability. Charles addressed these concerns by explaining his plan to control the narrative themselves, rather than allowing Henderson or the media to dictate how the story was told. He intended to arrange for Camilla to meet with Emma privately first, and only if their relationship developed positively would they consider any public acknowledgement. As the meeting concluded, Charles issued specific instructions for how they would proceed. Sir Michael was to arrange secure communication with Emma Clark through diplomatic channels, while royal security would monitor Henderson's activities to prevent any further harassment or threats. Most importantly, Charles insisted that all actions be taken with Emma's well-being as the primary consideration, recognizing that she was an innocent victim in Henderson's scheme. The transformation in both Charles and Camilla was remarkable to witness. What had begun as a crisis threatening to destroy their marriage and damage the monarchy had become an opportunity for healing and growth. Their decision to face the situation with courage and honesty had strengthened their bond and given them a sense of purpose that transcended their royal duties. However, they both understood that the most challenging part of their journey was still ahead, as they prepared to reach out to the daughter Camilla had never stopped loving. Emma Clark stood in her Sydney office overlooking the harbor, holding a phone that had just delivered the most unexpected call of her life. The voice on the other end belonged to someone from the British Embassy, speaking with careful diplomatic language about a sensitive matter involving the royal family. For 3 weeks, Emma had been struggling to process the shocking revelation about her birth mother's identity, and now she was being offered the chance to speak directly with Queen Camilla herself. The successful marketing executive had built her life on logic and careful planning, but nothing had prepared her for the emotional tornado that followed Sarah Henderson's cruel revelation. Emma had always known she was adopted and had occasionally wondered about her biological parents, but she had never imagined that her birth mother could be someone so prominent in public. The discovery had left her feeling confused, angry, and strangely empty, as if her entire identity had been called into question. When the embassy official explained that the queen consort was hoping to arrange a private conversation, Emma's first instinct was to refuse. She felt manipulated by Henderson's approach and was suspicious of any contact that came through official channels. However, something in the carefully worded invitation suggested genuine concern rather than damage control, and Emma found herself agreeing to a secure video call that would take place the following evening. Meanwhile, back in London, Camilla was experiencing her own emotional turmoil as she prepared for what might be the most important conversation of her life. She had spent hours with Lady Margaret, an especially appointed counselor, discussing how to approach a daughter who had every reason to feel abandoned and betrayed. The Queen Consort was acutely aware that Emma owed her nothing and had every right to reject any attempt at contact. Charles had been remarkably supportive throughout the preparation process, helping Camilla rehearse what she might say, while also reminding her that Emma's response was completely beyond their control. He had arranged for the video call to take place in their private apartment, away from staff and official protocols, hoping to create as normal an environment as possible for such an extraordinary conversation. When the appointed time arrived, both women sat before their respective screens with hearts racing and hands trembling. The first few moments were awkward as they simply looked at each other, seeing familial resemblances that were unmistakable despite the years and distance between them. Camilla spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper as she apologized for the way Emma had learned the truth and expressed her regret about the circumstances of their separation. Emma listened carefully as Camilla explained the situation she had faced as a young woman, the pressure from family and society, and the belief that adoption would provide the best opportunity for her daughter's future. The Queen Consort was honest about her youth and mistakes, but also shared how often she had thought about her daughter over the years and wondered about the woman she had become. The conversation was difficult and emotional, with long pauses as both women struggled to find the right words. Emma asked direct questions about why Camilla had never tried to find her, and Camilla answered honestly about her fears of disrupting Emma's life and her concerns about the impact of royal connections. She assured Emma that she had no expectations or demands, but simply wanted her daughter to know that she had been loved and thought about every single day. As the call progressed, Emma began to see past the royal title to the woman who was clearly struggling with decades of regret and longing. She shared details about her own life, her adoptive parents who had loved her deeply, her successful career, and her own questions about family and belonging. The conversation revealed that both women were intelligent, strong-willed, and surprisingly similar in their approaches to life and relationships. By the end of their 2-hour conversation, neither woman had made any commitments about future contact, but both felt a sense of relief and possibility that had been missing from their lives. Emma agreed to consider further communication, while Camilla promised to respect whatever decision her daughter made about their relationship. They arranged to speak again the following week, giving both of them time to process their feelings and decide how they wanted to proceed. Charles was waiting anxiously when Camilla emerged from the call, and he was moved to see a sense of peace on her face that had been absent for months. She described the conversation as difficult but healing, explaining that Emma was everything she had hoped her daughter would become. While their relationship was still fragile and uncertain, the first step toward reconciliation had been taken, and both women seemed committed to exploring the possibility of a connection that honored their past while building toward a hopeful future. Sarah Henderson's apartment in Manchester had become a fortress of desperation and delusion as she realized her blackmail scheme was falling apart. For 2 months, she had expected to receive either payment or public acknowledgement of her demands, but instead she had been met with complete silence from the royal household. Her financial situation had grown increasingly desperate since losing her job at the adoption agency, and she had convinced herself that exposing Camilla's secret was her only path to financial security. What Henderson did not know was that she had been under constant surveillance by royal protection officers since the investigation began. Every phone call, every email, and every movement had been carefully monitored as authorities built a comprehensive case against her. The evidence of extortion, theft of confidential documents, and harassment was overwhelming, but Charles had insisted that they wait until Emma and Camilla had the opportunity to establish their own relationship before taking any legal action. The breakthrough in their case came when Henderson made a critical mistake in her growing frustration. She attempted to sell her story to several tabloid newspapers, providing them with copies of the stolen adoption documents and photographs as proof of her claims. This action finally gave authorities the evidence they needed to move forward with charges, as Henderson had now committed multiple crimes across different jurisdictions. Detective Inspector Sarah Williams of the Metropolitan Police was assigned to lead the investigation, working closely with Royal Protection Services to ensure that Henderson's arrest and prosecution would not compromise the ongoing reconciliation between Camilla and Emma. The operation required delicate timing and careful coordination to prevent any media leaks that could expose the story before the royal family was ready to address it publicly. Meanwhile, the relationship between Camilla and Emma had been developing slowly but positively through weekly video calls and email exchanges. Emma had decided to take a leave of absence from her job in Sydney and travel to London to meet her birth mother in person. The meeting was arranged to take place at Highgrove House, Charles's private residence, where they could have complete privacy away from official protocols and media attention. Charles had taken an active role in preparing for Emma's visit, understanding that this meeting could determine the future of his wife's relationship with her daughter. He arranged for comfortable accommodations in a nearby village and ensured that Emma would have access to support services if she needed them. His genuine care for Emma's well-being had impressed Camilla deeply and had strengthened their own marriage even further. The day of Emma's arrival in London, Henderson was quietly arrested at her apartment without fanfare or media coverage. The timing was not coincidental, as Charles wanted to ensure that this threat was neutralized before Emma's visit could be disrupted or complicated by Henderson's continued interference. The arrest was carried out by a small team of experienced officers who specialized in sensitive cases involving public figures. Emma's first face-to-face meeting with Camilla took place in the garden at Highgrove, surrounded by the flowers and plants that had brought the queen consort so much peace over the years. Both women were nervous but determined to make the most of this opportunity to connect in person. The conversation flowed more naturally than either had expected, helped by the relaxed setting and the absence of formal protocols. Charles joined them for lunch, and Emma was struck by the genuine warmth and normalcy of their interaction as a couple. She had expected formality and distance, but instead found herself in the company of two people who were clearly devoted to each other and genuinely interested in getting to know her as a person rather than simply acknowledging her as an obligation. Over the course of 3 days, Emma and Camilla spent hours talking about their lives, their hopes, and their dreams for whatever relationship they might build together. Emma shared stories about her adoptive parents, her career, and her own struggles with relationships and identity. Camilla spoke about her journey through public life, her role as a grandmother, and her deep regrets about the years they had lost together. By the end of Emma's visit, both women had decided that they wanted to maintain a relationship, though they agreed it should develop naturally without pressure or artificial timelines. Emma would return to Australia to settle her affairs there, with plans to relocate to London within 6 months if she decided to pursue a closer relationship with her birth mother. They also agreed that any public acknowledgement of their relationship would be Emma's decision to make when and if she felt ready. Charles was deeply moved by the transformation he witnessed in Camilla during Emma's visit. The guilt and regret that had shadowed her for so many years had begun to lift, replaced by hope and genuine happiness. He realized that their decision to face this crisis with honesty and courage had not only resolved the immediate threat, but had also opened the door to healing that neither of them had believed possible. The palace was buzzing with carefully controlled activity as news of Sarah Henderson's arrest began to circulate through certain government and media circles. Although the arrest had been handled discreetly, experienced royal correspondents were starting to ask questions about why someone connected to an adoption agency from the 1970s had been charged with extortion involving the royal family. Charles knew they had only a limited window of time before the story broke publicly, and he was determined to control how it was revealed. Sir Michael Thornton had been working around the clock with the palace's communications team to develop a strategy for managing the inevitable media storm. Their approach would be unprecedented in royal history, involving a level of personal disclosure that no monarch had ever attempted before. Charles was prepared to go beyond traditional royal communications and speak directly to the British people about his family's situation. With complete honesty and vulnerability, Emma had returned to Sydney but remained in daily contact with both Camilla and Charles as they navigated the complexities of preparing for public disclosure. She had initially been terrified about becoming the center of media attention, but the support and guidance she received from her newfound family gave her the courage to face whatever was coming. More importantly, she had decided that she wanted to be part of any public statement, standing beside Camilla rather than hiding from their relationship. The decision was made to announce Emma's existence and her relationship with Camilla before Henderson's case went to trial, thereby controlling the narrative and preventing any sensationalized coverage that might emerge from court proceedings. Charles arranged for a special televised address to be broadcast from Windsor Castle, where he would speak directly to the nation about family, forgiveness, and the human side of royal life. 3 days before the scheduled broadcast, Emma arrived back in London accompanied by her adoptive parents, who had flown from Australia to support her through this challenging time. Charles and Camilla's first meeting with Emma's adoptive parents was emotional and beautiful, as all parties recognized their shared love for Emma and their desire to support her happiness above all else. The night before the broadcast, the entire extended family gathered for a private dinner at Windsor Castle. Emma's adoptive parents, David and Helen Clark, were welcomed warmly by Charles and Camilla, who expressed their gratitude for the loving home and excellent upbringing Emma had received. The evening was filled with laughter, tears, and the kind of honest conversation that builds lasting family bonds. Charles spent hours in preparation for his address, working with speechwriters to craft a message that would be both personal and appropriate for a head of state. He wanted to speak not just as a king, but as a husband and stepfather, sharing the human story behind the headlines while also addressing the broader themes of family, acceptance, and moving forward from past mistakes. The broadcast itself was unlike anything in royal communications history. Charles spoke directly to the camera from his study at Windsor Castle, with family photographs visible in the background, including a new one featuring Emma. He began by acknowledging that the royal family, like all families, had complicated histories and private struggles that were not always visible to the public. He spoke about Camilla's courage in sharing her secret, his own admiration for the difficult choices she had made as a young woman, and his joy in welcoming Emma into their family. Charles addressed the blackmail attempt directly, explaining that while they regretted the circumstances that brought Emma back into their lives, they were grateful for the opportunity to build a relationship with her. Most significantly, Charles used the address to speak about the evolving nature of the monarchy and royal family, acknowledging that they were human beings with complex personal histories, rather than perfect symbols. He emphasized that their commitment to serving the British people remained unchanged, but that they would do so with greater honesty and authenticity than previous generations had felt able to provide. Emma appeared briefly at the end of the broadcast, speaking confidently about her decision to embrace her birth family while honoring her adoptive parents. Her poise and intelligence were immediately apparent, and she expressed her hope that their story would encourage other families dealing with adoption, separation, and reconciliation. The public response to the broadcast was overwhelmingly positive, with many people expressing admiration for the royal family's honesty and courage. Social media filled with messages of support for Emma and praise for Charles and Camilla's handling of a difficult situation. Even traditionally critical media outlets acknowledged that the king's transparency and vulnerability had strengthened rather than weakened the monarchy's connection with ordinary people. Henderson's attempt to destroy the royal family had instead resulted in their emergence as more relatable and human figures, while her own criminal actions had been exposed and would soon face justice. The crisis that had threatened to tear apart Charles and Camilla's marriage had ultimately brought them closer together and expanded their family in ways they had never expected. 6 months later, the transformation in the royal family was evident to everyone who knew them personally. Emma had relocated permanently to London and had become a regular presence at family gatherings, seamlessly integrating into royal life while maintaining her own independence and career. She had established a successful consulting business that allowed her to work internationally while remaining close to her newfound family. The relationship between Emma and Camilla had developed into something beautiful and natural, neither trying to recreate a traditional mother-daughter dynamic nor settling for something artificially formal. They spoke daily, shared interests in art and literature, and had developed the kind of easy companionship that comes from genuine mutual respect and affection. Emma's presence had brought a new lightness to Camilla's life that was noticed by everyone around her. Charles had embraced his role as Emma's stepfather with characteristic warmth and dedication. He took pride in her accomplishments and enjoyed their conversations about business, politics, and international affairs. Emma's intelligence and global perspective had enriched family discussions, and she had become a trusted advisor on matters relating to modern communications and youth engagement for royal initiatives. Sarah Henderson's trial had concluded with her conviction on multiple charges, including extortion, theft, and harassment. The judge had been particularly harsh in his sentencing remarks, noting that Henderson had attempted to exploit private family matters for personal gain, while causing significant emotional distress to innocent parties. She received a substantial prison sentence and was ordered to pay compensation, though the royal family had indicated they would donate any monetary awards to adoption support charities. The public's response to the royal family's handling of the crisis had exceeded all expectations. Approval ratings for both Charles and Camilla had reached historic highs, with polls showing that the majority of British people felt the monarchy had become more relatable and trustworthy. The honest approach to addressing family complexities had resonated particularly strongly with younger demographics who had previously shown less interest in royal affairs. Emma's relationship with her adoptive parents had actually been strengthened by her connection to the royal family. David and Helen Clark had become regular visitors to London and had been warmly welcomed into royal circles. Their grace and dignity in navigating this unusual situation had impressed everyone, and they had formed genuine friendships with Charles and Camilla based on their shared love for Emma. The broader impact on royal communications strategy had been revolutionary. Charles's decision to speak with unprecedented personal honesty had established a new template for how the monarchy could address challenges while maintaining dignity and public support. Other royal family members had begun adopting similar approaches to their own public engagements, creating a more authentic and accessible image for the institution as a whole. Emma had also become involved in several charitable initiatives, particularly those focused on adoption support and family reunification services. Her unique perspective as someone who had experienced both adoption and later reconnection with birth family had made her a powerful advocate for policies that supported all parties in complex family situations. Her work had attracted international attention and had positioned her as a thoughtful voice on modern family dynamics. The silver locket that had once represented Camilla's secret guilt and regret had been transformed into a symbol of hope and healing. She now wore it openly, and it had become a conversation starter for discussions about adoption, family complexity, and the importance of second chances. The photograph inside had been updated to include pictures of Emma as an adult, representing the bridge between past and present. As the first anniversary of Emma's public acknowledgement approached, the royal family was planning a quiet celebration that would include all the people who had supported them through this journey. The guest list included Emma's adoptive parents, Lady Margaret Whitfield, Sir Michael Thornton, and several close friends who had provided counsel and support during the difficult months. Charles often reflected on how the crisis that could have destroyed his marriage and damaged the monarchy had instead strengthened both. His relationship with Camilla had reached new depths of intimacy and trust, while the monarchy itself had evolved to become more human and accessible without losing its essential dignity. The decision to face the truth with courage rather than hiding behind traditional protocols had proven to be transformational in ways none of them could have anticipated. Looking forward, the royal family was excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. Emma was considering starting a family of her own, which would bring new joy and complexity to their relationships. Charles and Camilla were approaching their royal duties with renewed energy and purpose, confident that their authentic approach to leadership was connecting with people in meaningful ways. The secret that had once threatened to tear them apart had ultimately brought them together in ways that were stronger and more beautiful than anything they had previously experienced.